moving to Fireside Chat, where we'll explore the role technology plays in different parts of talent management, from bringing the right international talent to have ways for distributed teams to stay connected without losing focus on what makes us human, empathy, compassion, and understanding. And please let me welcome our guest speaker, Linnea, Senior Editor at The Next Web.
Thank you. That's such a lovely welcome. So just a little bit first about me and perhaps why I'm speaking on the topic tech/humanity. I am the senior editor at The Next Web, but have also been a yoga teacher for the past 10 years. And so compassion and connection is something that is very much dear to my heart. And I have lived I'm from Sweden, so I've lived in Northern Europe. I spent 7 years in Greece, so I lived in South of Europe. I spent 7 years in Russia, so I've lived in Eastern Europe. And now I'm in Amsterdam, so Western Europe. So I have had many different experiences working in many different environments and trying to make my way through the world as it has shifted and technology has gone from being an email to my mother at an internet cafe that I paid 1,000 drachmas for an hour once upon a time, into something that is so all-pervasive in all of our lives. And it is a challenging field to navigate, and I think we're all trying to figure that out, and I'm very happy that we can figure that out together, or at least that we're interested in doing that.
We have a lot in common there, from moving across the world, but also I actually also did a yoga teacher training. Fun fact. But yeah, maybe starting off with the big picture. Technology, as I said, has always been part of how companies work, how we communicate. It's ingrained in everything. But things are different now. There seems to be more of everything: opportunities, innovation, a lot of positive things, but also more challenges, anxiety, and questions. Do you think that's the case, or is that just an everlasting cycle? What is your view on that?
I think yes and no. I will probably say yes and no quite a few times throughout this panel, and I will probably contradict myself once or twice as well. I think that yes, technology has always been a part of how companies operate and work, like the Industrial Revolution. Everyone's like, okay, my job is gone. And yes, those jobs were gone, but it also created a different set of jobs. And many jobs that exist today did not exist 10 years ago. And so we cannot say, okay, I want this technology, but until this point. And then I don't want it anymore, because then it starts to challenge me in terms of uncertainty for my future. And so things will shift and change, and I think the more we can accept that and sit with the uncertainty of that we don't know what the future will look like, the less perhaps our personal anxiety around it will be. What I think is different now, if you compare it to, say, the steam engine, etc., is that we have a third player in the arena. It's not just the employer that has the technology that might perhaps replace the worker. We also have big tech and billions of dollars put into behavioral algorithms, etc. And so we have brains today that are being primed for anxiety. Okay? It is the continuous context shifting, the continuous feed of information, the overflow of news, especially with what's going on in the world today. That all adds up. And if we don't find ways of, I really don't like the term self-care. I'm a yoga teacher, but I don't like the term self-care because I think it's being used as an excuse for companies not to practice other care. Meaning, how can we care for each other before we get to the point where that kind of anxiety over technology threatens to overwhelm us, and we can no longer function both in our roles as workers and in our roles as compassionate human beings. So I think that's the difference today, and it does feel like things are speeding up, right? Or is that just my age? And everything relatively feels like it's moving faster. But it does feel like technological evolution has sped up, and I don't know what your thoughts are about that. But we don't know what the next year will look like, from having not known perhaps what the next decade will look like.
Yeah, very true. Also, to me, it also moves faster, so I can relate to that. I think it's also, of course, like we can see technology as like something good, something bad, but I think it's also, there's an element of like how we use it, and especially from the area that we are in, global mobility, immigration, you can do a lot with technology. You can build around governments, which is a great thing. but also every journey across borders is very, very personal. And so it is about a conscious decision of where do we apply technology, where do we want to have a human touch. What is your view on that? Like, is it the technology itself, or is it really the use of technology?
Yes and no. I think, yes, it has been up until now how we use the technology to a great extent. I think the difference now, again, going back to big tech, is how the technology is using us. Right? It's the attention economy, the data economy. The matrix is essentially here in a way. It's just we're being mined for our data, rather than having tubes stuck down our biological organisms. And I think we need to make a very conscious choice in how we interact with that so that we reclaim the agency of how we use technology. And I think only then will we be able to create all the benefits that this technology, I mean AI, hello, if you haven't heard that term about 50 times already today, or millions of times throughout the last year. And all the other technological advancements that we are bound to see, I think we need to reclaim agency in that way and not just be towed along. Because this technology, it has so much benefit. Like remote working is so beneficial. It actually provides access to work for people who would not otherwise have that, perhaps, opportunity. People who cannot get out of their apartment for whatever mobility reasons, health reasons, mental health reasons. I have a neurological condition that I deal with every day. It's called visuals. Now I have like little sparkles in front of my eyes 24/7. It's like a filter over everything. I can't be in an office environment for a full day of work with the lights and the sounds and everything. It becomes quite overwhelming. I can do it for a couple of days a week. But so without remote working, I would not be able to have a full-time job. So this is something that I care deeply about, the potential of this technology. And so, yeah, I think the question becomes also, what is your intention for using the technology? Is it something that is mutually beneficial for both employee and employer? And how do you make sure of that? And also, of course, looking at AI, how can you reduce the bias? Yeah. Because most AI models are black box models. We don't know how they achieved the result or the prediction that they were making. And in this case, you need to create, not just jump on the train like, oh, this can be so much efficiency saving, etc. You need to also find ways to evaluate how the model was trained. You need to get people to actually look at how the model arrived to its results, or increase at least the explainability and the transparency, of these kinds of technology. So yes and no.
Yeah. Another key word in that, like especially when we think about what is good for the employee, the employer, and like that relationship, a keyword that comes to mind is trust. And really both sides being truthful, having the right intentions, like also how to employ technology, transparency. In your role, like what are the trends that you are seeing about the topic and the role technology plays again?
Well, I see one very alarming trend, which is employee monitoring software, etc. I think I read just yesterday there's a Chinese AI company that is the moment an employee takes too long a lunch break because they're being pressured so hard to arrive at these new developments in AI to beat the competitor. The moment they take too long a lunch break, I don't know the exact minutes, but then they're deducted points from their employee scoring system. Okay? And what I heard, time monitoring software also just a few days ago. And I mean, the pandemic showed us what it's like when all boundaries are gone, right? And I had so many friends that told me that they would just roll out of bed and go to their kitchen table, sit at their computer, have breakfast at the computer, and then that's what their day looked like. My partner, when I said, do you want to go for a walk? This was the time when I was freelancing, so I had quite a bit of, I could use my time in the way that I wanted to. I said, do you want to go for a walk? He said, no, I can't, because they will see that I wasn't online. Mm-hmm. And that kind of mental idea that you're constantly being surveilled and that someone's keeping tabs on you and does not trust you, that grates at a person. Like, it's quite imperceptible, but it's very potent. And I think as an employer, you have to start with the idea that I hired you, therefore I trust you. Like if I have chosen you to, if I have chosen to hire you for this position, it means that I trust you to do your job. And so doing away with that. I think also that it is a two-way relationship between trust and responsibility. I think communication is key. I find myself as an editor, we have flexible working hours. But as an editor, if my journalist, the journalist that reports to me doesn't respond when I send out a question for an hour and a half on Slack, I start to feel a little annoyed. And I'm like, what did you do? But sometimes I think, yeah, the problems with the code can also solve themselves when you're, out for a walk or taking your dog for an hour walk at lunchtime rather than, the 20-minute quick around the block. Right? And I think not losing sight of that, of the individuality within the process and within all these systems and within all these tools that we now have to create a more efficient workflow and environment.
At the same time, I think like they're for a company to and that's something that I've seen as well. What are the rules you implement so that you can you still have the opportunity to call someone back? Like what do you, for example, put in there? What can you enable? But also at the same time, I think that structures sometimes really feel stressful because then something might happen and then you're still forced to follow a protocol first. So I think technology can really make that easier, have very, very different workflows, policies, setups. Would love to hear maybe things that you've seen there. How can technology enable catering better to employees' needs in the day-to-day work?
Well, I think, again, it comes down to just to comment a little bit on what you said before the question. I think that comes down to communication again. When it comes to expectations. And I think that for some people it works really well to have a little neat checklist and to see how much time you're going to spend on something, and then you can tick a box when you've done that. And there are so many tools out there now that does that, right, in terms of time management and in terms of project management, in terms of how you can structure a team, what is expected for everyone in terms of deliverables, etc. For some people that is very stressful. And that is something that you have to take into consideration. I'm not saying that you should, accommodate the outliers on each direction, but if you see that a person is struggling with something, with meeting targets, with meeting deadlines, sit down with them, have a conversation, ask why is this not working? What is causing this particular, like what is causing this hurdle? What is causing this sense of stress? Why do you feel overwhelmed? Have a conversation about that. See how you can adapt perhaps the technological tools that you use. But I think that the clarity in terms of expectations and lack of confusion of having tried to figure things out all the time, or having to reach out to someone and actually having that in a mutual space where you can always go and see, like, okay, this is what is expected of me in terms of this week. And again, a little bit of responsibility there again to then stay on top of that and to stay informed, because how many times have we written like Slack messages or something and then someone pops the question anyway just a little bit down because they didn't go and look, you know, they didn't scroll 1 minute, you know, I just put everything there, like it's all in detail. And so it goes both ways again. But I think if someone then feels, and again, communication, if someone then feels that keeping up to date with Slack is something that is making me stressed, all this different means of communication is causing something that is making me feel overwhelmed, communicate that. So I think technology has all the opportunity to free us up from all the drudgery work that is bringing us down and taking, you know, like our energy and just go like, oh my God, I can't, you know, another spreadsheet. Like it has the opportunity to free us up to be more creative, to go for more walks, if that's, you know, if that's the way that things settle in your mind for you, or however else you metabolize stress or workload. And so yeah, I know that there has been some very interesting discussions, and I am sure that there are people who know in more technical detail how these tools can actually be applied in that way, but that's my human take.
That's super interesting. Thank you. Now, also looking into the next years, looking into the future. Of course, I think it's fair to say that tech will continue to shape what we're doing. If we look at next year, but also next 5 years, what do you think are the biggest trends in HR tech, but also maybe in the broader world that will shape the way that we work?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to AI. I think, again, finding ways of more personalization without increasing bias and without also breaching privacy, because that comes back to trust. And I think in order to enhance that, we're going to see perhaps a good use of blockchain technology so that we can securely take care of people's data to the point where we can personalize perhaps retention interventions, if we're talking from an HR context, where we can personalize closing skill gaps, where we can personalize the hiring experience, automating the hiring experience while also personalizing the hiring experience at a different stage. I think we're going to see a lot more targeted job advertisements. I think we're going to see more data on what do your talent actually want from an employer. Hopefully that will lead to more value-based propositions as well. Because I think that people are really in the midst of all this technological evolution, and it's wonderful what it all can do, but I think that we're all also looking for something that's purposeful. Whether that is working with humans, like HR, human resources, right? I think all this efficiency that we can floored by what he was experiencing. And he said that even though it was Zuckerberg, he said that he could see these little micro movements of eyes and ears and cheeks and everything. He felt like he was talking to a real person. If you haven't seen it, Google it on YouTube. Google it on YouTube. Well, YouTube's the most Google site. But I think that in terms of the hiring process might become a thing, because you can actually have a more human connection. You can create more empathy, more compassion through seeing these little actual human expressions on a face, instead of having a little square where you see that person and you see yourself, and then you get carried away because like, that's not a wrinkle I didn't have yesterday, I don't know where that came from. And all these conversations that you're having about and yourself and the person, you're trying to stay present. So I'm much more optimistic now when I'm talking about this than I was when I was talking to Philip, who was on the panel before, because we tried to figure out what was going to happen, and he told me what he also said on the panel, that there will be some tech-savvy people applying for jobs that might overload the system. And of course, the solution to that AI-generated problem will be more AI, until we have built something that we have no idea what it is. But I think that is also a question of cybersecurity. We're going to see a lot more effort into that, into protection of both people data, but also company data. Because if you have someone sending out generative AI applications, there is also the potential for malware code in that. So it is a way to get into the organization's sort of inner workings. And then what's to stop them from sending out thousands and thousands of applications and throw spaghetti on the wall, see what sticks, okay? And so I think organizations are gonna have to find ways of marrying the HR tech that they will be deploying in terms of finding talent, in terms of retaining talent, and well, not maybe retaining talent, but in terms of what they can offer to become attractive. Employees can marry that with security, and I would say that's something to start looking into quite immediately.
Also, what you say about the metaverse, I think that is another step that will help us to enable people to live where they want, which I think, like, again, when it was interesting, we were, Localyze was founded before COVID, and then COVID hit, and a lot of people said, oh, now that we can work remotely, like, no one will move across borders. Very wrong, because people want to move. But I think, like, it's another enabler that helps people to actually move more, because I think, like, then they can switch locations, there can be much more fluidity. But doubling down on that, what do you have, like, any sense of what the impact will be maybe in terms of companies being more location independent, or do you think, like, that adoption would rather take another 50 years instead of, like, we won't see an immediate effect?
I mean, we're seeing two trends there as well. One is the companies calling people back to the office and wanting to be more localized and wanting to have people in the office, and Zoom, for example, which is quite ironic, but make people come back to the office. And the other trend is, where I don't know if it's a trend. I mean, COVID highlighted it. And obviously made it into something that's ubiquitous. But if you have, for example, David Hansen, the founder of Ruby on Rails, he wrote a book called Remote, like over 10 years ago. And there are practices there. And I think that companies who want to have their pick of the talent today will need to offer that. It's just, I think, something that the younger generations have grown accustomed to. Even if people work the best from an office, which a lot of people do, I think that they absolutely want the possibility to be able to work remotely for a month, let's say a year or 3 months. So, does that answer your question? Sorry, no, I got lost in that.
No, but it's exactly also the example of, like, Zoom, let's say, like, while they're calling people back to the office, and, like, if they would see expressions of people in the metaverse better, would they not do that? Yeah, it's with that debate, we can go very far. We only have a few minutes left, so I also wanted to open it to the audience. Questions that you might have, now is the time to ask them. It's okay, you don't have to. Usually it always takes a few minutes. No, but otherwise maybe like a closing question from my side, especially for people working at or in global mobility. What are because like now you shared a great resource, a video that people can watch, but also is there anything else we could say, hey, this is another trend to watch out for. This is like really something that you should also put on the agenda of your CEO.
Oh, well, I would say if you have a remote team or a hybrid team, I would say use old school tech like trains, planes, and automobiles and get people together. Doesn't have to be often. Again, a question of equity. Are people able to physically come and be there? But I think that's a good idea to get people together. It doesn't have to be often. Doesn't have to be grand. Doesn't have to be a villa in Tuscany. You know, but just have people meet every now and then so that they remember the human behind the tech. Also, when you have decentralized HR departments, you know, this is something that's really important, that you actually meet the people who are the decisions that you're making on behalf of them, that you have met them, you have spoken to them. Before we get to at least the very sophisticated version of the VR headset that Zuckerberg was using, to see these little micro expressions, all this information that we take in that is not intellectual, right? That we cannot gain from a screen. And then I would say don't underestimate like the small, simple things. I worked entirely remotely with a team for 3 years before I joined TNW here in Amsterdam. And I never met these people once, but I still feel all together. But I still feel very much connected to them, and it was through such a simple thing as a monthly quiz on Zoom. And I know that Zoom drinks are nobody's favorite. Like, they're the most awkward thing on the planet. But it's something that everybody who worked there said. Like, what do you remember most fondly from your time at Simplifies and aviation publication? And everyone says the quizzes. Like, and it was really, really just a simple human way of being together. And again, it might not work for everyone, but it worked for a great deal of us. So don't discard, with all the fancy new tech that's out there, all the interactive learning experiences, all the online team building exercises, don't forget, the small human things.
Thank you so much. With that, we're wrapping up our last panel, our last fireside chat. Thank you so much for all the insights. Really enjoyed it. We want to spend some more time until 1. We have a bit of coffee, still a bit of food here. Would also love to take the chances to connect with a few more. But yeah, big thanks for being here. Thanks again to you.
Thank you for having me.
And then have a great rest of the day and a great rest half hour together with us, I hope.